You're born in a royal compound in Niani, capital of the Mali Empire. Drums announce your arrival before the midwife even cuts the cord. Griots begin composing verses about your lineage, tracing the Keita bloodline through wars, conquests, and divine mandates. Your mother rests on cushions dyed with desert saffron. Your father's attendants arrange gifts in the courtyard, stacks of gold so routine that nobody pauses to admire them. The empire your family controls spans thousands of miles of savanna, forest, and sand. Its mines produce nearly half of all the gold circulating in the known world. You are weeks old and already wealthier than most kingdoms. Scholars pray over you in Arabic. Warriors pledge loyalty to a name you can't yet pronounce. Servants will attend your every movement from this day until your last. You didn't choose this inheritance. It chose you generations before you were born, and it has no intention of letting you go. Your childhood unfolds inside a compound that most people in the known world couldn't imagine. Niani isn't the primitive village that foreign merchants expect. It's a capital of packed earth avenues, clay-walled estates with carved wooden lintels, and marketplaces where traders from Egypt and Morocco haggle under cotton awnings. Your family's compound alone houses dozens of rooms, a private mosque with hand-painted calligraphy along its walls, and quarters for scholars who live entirely on your father's patronage. The air smells of shea butter and burning acacia wood. You hear the call to prayer 5 times a day before you understand what it means. You don't learn alongside other children. Islamic tutors arrive each morning to teach you Arabic script, Quranic recitation, and mathematics. You study the movements of trade routes the way other boys study games. The gold mines of Bambouk and Bouré sit at the foundation of everything your family controls. Salt crosses the Sahara from the north on camel caravans that stretch for miles. Gold flows upward to meet it. This exchange, ton for ton, sometimes pound for pound, generates wealth on a scale that no European kingdom of your era approaches. But you don't experience that wealth as freedom. You experience it as architecture. Every room you enter has been arranged for your protection. Every meal is tasted before it reaches you. Every person in your presence has been evaluated by men whose loyalty your family purchased long before you were born. You play with the sons of nobles and military commanders, boys who already understand the hierarchy. They laugh when you laugh. Then they stop when you stop. That distance isn't something you chose. It was built into the walls before you could walk. Your tutors insist on discipline with a gravity that borders on fear. A king who cannot read his own treaties, one of them tells you while pressing your hand against the parchment, is a king who signs his own defeat. You memorize passages from the Quran. You learn the Hadith. You absorb the principles of Islamic jurisprudence because in Mali, faith and governance are the same structure. The empire's legitimacy rests on its devotion. Your legitimacy will rest on yours. And even at this age, you sense that the weight pressing down on your chest isn't love, it's expectation. Your position in the dynasty is anything but guaranteed. Mali doesn't pass power from father to son the way other kingdoms do. The throne moves laterally, from brother to brother, from uncle to nephew. You're Keita blood, but that alone promises nothing. You watch the court and learn its arithmetic. Alliances form around strong men and dissolve when those men weaken. Loyalty here isn't a principle. It's a calculation that everyone recalculates constantly. The emperor above you is Abu Bakr II, a man consumed by a single obsession that the rest of the court considers madness. He believes the Atlantic Ocean has another shore. He commissions 200 vessels and sends them west across open water. None return. He commissions 2,000 more. He announces he will lead the expedition himself. His closest advisors protest. He doesn't listen. Before departing, he appoints you as his deputy, a temporary arrangement, a formality. Hold the throne until I return, he says. He sails west with his fleet and vanishes completely. No ship comes back, no message arrives, no wreckage is ever found. The court receives the news in silence. You stand in the throne room and feel the air change around you. Men who spoke to you casually the week before now lower their eyes when you enter. Servants who once addressed you by name begin calling you Mansa. The temporary arrangement becomes permanent. You didn't seize power, you didn't campaign for it, you didn't inherit it through bloodline. The throne fell to you because a man chased the horizon and never came back. And now every decision in an empire of millions belongs to you alone. The empire you now control is staggering in scale. Over 400 cities spread across a territory roughly the size of Western Europe. Your mines produce nearly half of all the gold circulating in the Old World. Salt arrives from Tagaza in the north, carried by camel across hundreds of miles of open desert. Gold moves in the opposite direction. The exchange generates wealth so immense that your treasury operates on a level that rivals any kingdom on earth. You reorganize taxation. You standardize trade regulations along the Niger River. You appoint governors to distant provinces and enforce Islamic law as the empire's unifying legal framework. But you also understand that gold sitting in vaults is politically inert. An elder advisor explains this one afternoon while walking the palace grounds, simplifying the principle for emphasis. Gold means nothing buried in the earth, he tells you, gesturing at the caravans loading beyond the walls. Your grandfather understood this. Gold must move. Through every market, every trade route, every negotiation, the empire breathes because gold circulates. The moment circulation stops, the empire suffocates. You absorb this completely. You understand that your power isn't fundamentally military, it's economic. You control the source of what every kingdom on earth desires most. And now, driven by both faith and ambition, you decide to show them exactly how much of it you possess. You announce your intention to perform the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca that every Muslim is called to undertake. It's a religious obligation, but you intend to make it something the world has never witnessed before. The caravan you assemble is unlike anything in recorded history. 60,000 men, 12,000 of them personal servants, each carrying a staff of solid gold that catches the Saharan light as the column moves. 80 camels walk in formation, each loaded with roughly 300 pounds of gold dust. Your senior wife travels with her own entourage of 500 attendants. The column stretches for miles across the savannah before it even reaches the edge of the desert. You bring livestock, grain, and water supplies calculated to sustain a small city across 4,000 miles of terrain. Scouts ride days ahead to prepare wells and campsites. Soldiers guard the flanks. Griots and Islamic scholars travel in the center alongside you. A commander organizing the departure watches the caravan take shape and shakes his head slowly. "This isn't a pilgrimage," he mutters to a subordinate. "This is a kingdom walking." Every detail is deliberate. The gold staffs, the matching garments, the sheer volume of attendance. You don't just want to reach Mecca. You want every kingdom between Niani and the Holy City to understand what Mali is. This is piety wrapped in spectacle. A religious journey transformed into an imperial declaration. The world beyond the Sahara doesn't know your empire exists. By the time this caravan finishes crossing the desert, no one along its path will be capable of forgetting it. You depart heading northeast toward Cairo, toward the moment that will change how the world understands wealth itself. The caravan enters Cairo and the city loses its composure. Women lean from second-story windows. Children run alongside the column shouting at the gold staffs. Market vendors abandon their stalls to watch. The procession stretches through Cairo's streets for hours. 60,000 people moving in coordinated formation. Camels carrying more wealth than most nations accumulate in a generation. The sound alone is overwhelming. Drums, chanting, the rhythmic clink of gold against gold, thousands of footsteps on packed earth. The Sultan Al-Nasir Muhammad receives you at his court. He's gracious, measured, and visibly uneasy. You sit with him as an equal, not a supplicant. He studies you carefully. "You bring enough gold to feed Egypt for a decade," he tells you during the reception. "I hope you understand what that means for my merchants." You don't fully understand. Not yet. Because you do what comes naturally. You give gold to everyone. Beggars, merchants, court officials, mosque attendants, servants who open doors, strangers who simply stand nearby. You distribute it with a generosity so absolute it feels less like charity and more like a natural disaster. You spend so freely in Cairo's bazaars that you single-handedly flood the regional gold supply. The price of gold collapses between 10 and 25%. It won't recover for over 12 years. Egyptian merchants who eagerly accepted your gold discover their existing reserves are suddenly worth less. You enriched and destabilized them in the same gesture. You are the only private individual in recorded history to crash the gold market of an entire region through personal spending alone. Your open hand just became an economic catastrophe. In Mecca, you fulfill the obligation, you pray at the Kaaba. You complete the rituals that every Muslim is called to perform at least once in a lifetime. For a brief, extraordinary moment, you're not an emperor. You're simply a pilgrim among pilgrims, anonymous before God. The spiritual purpose of the entire journey is achieved, and it feels genuine. That feeling doesn't last. On the return through Cairo, you see what your generosity actually produced. The markets are still distorted months later. Merchants argue in doorways about devalued gold. A shopkeeper who received your gift now sells goods at prices that make no sense because the currency beneath every transaction has shifted. The economy that functioned perfectly before your arrival is warped in ways that will take over a decade to correct. Yeah, you attempt a remedy that reveals the depth of the problem. You borrow back large quantities of gold from Cairo's lenders at extraordinarily high interest rates, deliberately pulling gold out of circulation to restabilize the price. It partially works, but the underlying damage is already embedded in every transaction the city processes. One night in a Cairo guest house, you sit alone while the sounds of the market arguments drift through the window. You came here to honor God. You left behind a broken economy. The contradiction sits in your chest like a stone, and for the first time you understand that wealth at your scale doesn't just buy things. It deforms everything it touches. You recruit the Andalusian architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili and a collection of scholars to accompany you home. Al-Sahili studies you quietly during the journey. You carry gold the way other men carry grief, he observes one evening, as if it weighs more than it should. The entire Mediterranean world now knows your name, your empire's location, and one critical fact. You possess wealth that can break economies. You wanted the world to see Mali. Now it sees you, and it will never stop calculating the value of what you control. Back in Mali, you build with the urgency of someone who understands that gold is only as permanent as the structures it creates. Al-Sahili designs the Jinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu, a structure of mud brick, limestone, and wooden beams that will still be standing 700 years after your death. You expand the University of Sankore until it houses 25,000 students, making it one of the largest centers of learning anywhere on Earth. Scholars travel from across the Islamic world to study and teach there. Manuscripts accumulate in private libraries by the tens of thousands. Timbuktu becomes synonymous with intellectual wealth, a city where books are valued more highly than gold. But an empire this vast carries its own disease. The territory is too large to govern from a single capital. Provincial governors grow comfortable with autonomy and slow to respond to central authority. Trade routes shift as competitors establish alternative paths. Rivals along your borders sharpen their ambitions. You begin walking the mosque grounds alone before dawn, a habit that starts as prayer and becomes something closer to pacing. The weight of administration never lifts. The threats never quiet. An aging advisor shares the truth you already feel settling in your bones. Empires this rich attract empires that are hungry, he tells you. Gold doesn't just buy loyalty. It purchases the attention of every power that wants to take what you have. You're growing older, and you feel it in the way mornings arrive heavier than they used to. The question of succession has no clean answer. Power in Mali still passes laterally, through contested claims and political maneuvering, not through bloodline certainty. The gold keeps flowing from Bambouk and Boura. The caravans still cross the desert. But the structure holding everything together is already bending under its own weight, and you can hear it in the silences between your advisor's reassurances. You die around 1337. The exact circumstances are uncertain. What follows is not. Your successors fight over the throne with the predictable ferocity of men who inherited power, but not the wisdom to hold it. Civil wars fracture provinces that you spent decades unifying. Trade routes that once funneled gold exclusively through your capital shift to rival kingdoms. Within 2 generations, the empire you constructed begins to dissolve from its edges inward, exactly the way your advisor warned. In 1375, a Spanish cartographer draws the Catalan Atlas. It depicts you seated on a golden throne, holding a nugget of gold the size of a fist, gazing across your domain. It's how Europe will remember you for centuries. But by the time that image circulates through Mediterranean courts, the Mali Empire is already shrinking. Timbuktu eventually falls to invaders. The manuscripts scatter, the mosques endure, but the empire behind them doesn't. You possessed more wealth than any individual in recorded history. You built universities that educated tens of thousands. You crashed a foreign economy with generosity alone. You made an entire continent visible to the rest of the world. And none of it survived you intact. You're the richest man who ever lived, immortalized on a map drawn by people who never set foot in your empire, ruling a kingdom that no longer exists. You were feared and respected across 3 continents, but never truly understood by any of them. You had everything a human being could accumulate, and it bought you nothing permanent. The gold that made you eternal is the same gold that made everything you built temporary. And that is the final immovable truth of your life. You owned more than any person who ever breathed, and it still wasn't enough to make a single thing last.